Everybody loves to hate on umpires to some degree, including myself, as many of them have huge egos and insert themselves at times when it's completely unnecessary in terms of ejections or just aggressive behavior. But with that being said, they do have highlights occasionally as well. And I don't think it'd be fair to not celebrate those. So that's what we're going to do here today. As this is previously released content, there may be some things I say that might sound a little out of date, but it shouldn't affect the overall content of the videos themselves within, which I do believe exist in a relative vacuum. That being said, make sure to let me know what your favorite was in the comments below. During Game 2 of the recent Mets-Red Sox series, Walker Buehler was ejected after he questioned a call from home plate umpire Mike Estabrook that concerned this pitch being called a ball. What pissed a lot of people off in the baseball space was the fact that Estabrook literally started approaching the mound in one of the more classist moves you'll see from a game caller. But instead of focusing on that right now, I want to point your attention to this moment, which was almost the direct opposite of this, when an umpire not only admitted he got a call wrong, but took full responsibility for it. Laz Diaz was behind the plate in a 5-1 game in the 9th when Christian Campbell got in the box. Campbell took a fastball outside before fouling another heater off to the right. It was on the 1-1, he would take this slider that wasn't really close for a called strike, with Christian displaying this pretty spirited reaction before asking for time and leaving the box. Diaz then, instead of ridiculing the young righty, put his hands on his knees and said the following. Now, if you couldn't quite make that out, he said, "That's on me, Christian. Hey, that's on me," acknowledging that he messed up the call and that he knew he did so only seconds after the initial pitch. This is just pure class to me. Umpires are humans, right? They're gonna make mistakes, but when they don't make some kind of big display of their ego and instead just admit they messed up, that's when they really endear themselves to me. As for the rest of the at-bat, Campbell would not end up taking another hack, drawing a leadoff walk after a number of additional offerings missed by sizable amounts. 3 batters later, however, the game was over, with the Mets emerging victorious 5-1. Though I would argue that, along with New York, another major winner here was Laz, who probably did a lot to raise his image in baseball circles with an impressive display of humility and accountability. A perfect game. There's few things in baseball history that are quite as rare, as only 24 in the history of recorded Major League Baseball have been thrown officially. But what about calling a perfect game behind the plate? There's actually even fewer examples of this, as, up until what we're going to be discussing today, only once in the history of umpire tracking has such a thing occurred, during the 2022 World Series when the now banned Patrick Hoberg got every single call correct of the hundreds of pitches thrown. This is simply a ludicrous accomplishment, right? So it makes sense that even though we're dealing with a far smaller sample size in comparison to something like perfect games, there are still almost 0 examples of it. But just yesterday, we saw the second one ever recorded per umpire scorecards, the foremost authority in umpire grading, and it was truly special. Take a look here at the scorecard for Mark Ripperger in a matchup between the Twins and Royals that Casey would go on to win 3-2. We can see that his overall accuracy was exactly 100%. But it gets even more ludicrous than this, as he made about 10.3 correct calls versus the average, resulting in a plus 7.5 relative accuracy. This means he made 136 of 136 calls exactly as they should have been. Obviously, this includes every high 90s fastball, nasty breaking ball, painted sinker, you name it. And I do want to make sure to give some context as to how rare this has been, even when considering we can't track these things as closely as perfect games. As it is every contest back through 2015 that has been analyzed by umpire scorecards, even if they were launched back in 2020 officially. And of these 10 years of games cataloged via Baseball Savant, including postseason contests, this is only the second time this has ever happened. And it was really important for the context of the game as well, being that it was such a low-scoring contest, any number of bad calls could have completely shifted the entire landscape of an inning, potentially upsetting the power balance en route to a result that would have been tainted overall. But absolutely 0 people can claim that any of Ripperger's calls were the deciding factor, as all of them were right on point. So, congratulations, Mark, on a truly momentous accomplishment, one that deserves to be recognized the league over for both its impressiveness and rarity in recent baseball history. Jen Pawol officially became the first woman umpire in Major League Baseball a couple days ago, manning first base and turning in a pretty normal performance. But just a day later, she was tasked with the assignment that inevitably defines every umpire's reputation league-wide, working behind the plate. And while things got off to a pretty rough start, she would indeed end up turning in a decent performance. I'll back that up metrically later on, but first, let's look at exactly how it went, along with the game overall. Like I said, the first pitch of the contest from Joey Wentz to Xavier Edwards was not the best look for her, as she called this fastball that was easily 2 ball lengths inside a strike. But, I mean, considering this was indeed her first major league call, a little nerves would make sense. And as they showed in a heat map later on in the broadcast, this does seem to be her zone, a bit inside to righties and outside to lefties. There would certainly be some more misses, including this big one to Dane Myers on a 3-1 count, but as the game went on, they became fewer and farther between. Meanwhile, the surprising Marlins, who've managed to in the last few months climb back to around 500, got off to the better start in this one, taking a 1-0 lead in the second inning on a 2-out single from catcher Liam Hicks. But the Braves would tie things up in the fourth on a solo homer from Matt Olson, who's sneakily having a very good year by the way. If you have a second, go look up his numbers. The top of the fifth would end on another semi-low light from Pawol, when she called this fastball, again, well off the plate away, to Kyle Stowers, a strike. Atlanta would take their first lead of the game in the bottom of that inning when Jurickson Profar flew a ball just over the head of the right fielder. Then, after a 3-2 pitch well away that still somehow elicited some belly aching from the Marlins dugout, Profar would score on a wild pitch, giving the Braves a 2-run cushion, and it never really felt competitive after that, as Ozuna from the Braves would add a 3-run home run in the seventh, before Michael Harris II would hit one of his own just a couple batters later. And that was that. A line out to left field would officially seal a 7-1 Atlanta victory, and the first home plate performance from Pawol. So, how exactly did she do overall? Well, according to Umpire scorecards, which I turn to a lot for umpire evaluation, she was just slightly below average, with an overall accuracy of 93% and consistency score of the same. She certainly favored that zone I detailed before, and correspondingly somewhat neglected the opposite side of the plate, but this is nothing too out of the ordinary for MLB umps. Everyone has their own unique approach. I would categorize it as a nondescript, mediocre performance, which, considering it was her first ever at this level, and the historical gravity of course that came along with that, I would count this personally as a major win. If you watch enough baseball, you're going to see some interference calls, whether it be on the batter for falling across home plate as a catcher goes to make a throw, on a catcher for allowing a batter's swing to hit his glove, or on a fan for touching a ball that's in the field of play, with the last one usually resulting in said fan getting kicked out of the venue completely. But one thing we don't see very often are interference calls on the umpires themselves. But that's actually exactly what just happened during a game between the Mets and the Yankees, and it was truly weird to watch. DJ LeMahieu was up to bat for the Yankees in the bottom of the sixth, with 2 guys on, coming off of his first home run of the season earlier in the contest. Facing his first pitch, he would take a sinker low, with both runners taking off, making it after a throw from Luis Torrens was late. However, almost immediately following this toss, we saw interference be called by the home plate umpire, James Jean. Not on LeMahieu, mind you, but on himself, and rightly so, because, as you can see here, as Torrens goes to make a throw, he makes contact with the face mask of Jean, forcing the play to be dead. Little side note here, but I apologize for not having a full speed replay of this one. It's actually really hard to find such a thing in any of the databases I use, so I'm more so going off of clips posted online for this one. This would put runners back at first and second, which honestly wouldn't end up mattering very much, as DJ would ground out a few pitches later to end the frame. Still, who knows? Maybe if there are guys on second and third instead of first and second, relief pitcher Brazoban would have pitched him a little differently, for fear of giving up a wild pitch or something. But I guess we'll never know at this point. As for the rest of the game, it would be hotly contested between the 2 New York teams, with veteran second baseman LeMahieu continuing to show out for his part, making this sliding play in the 7th inning to save a potential run. He would also later crush this line drive with the bases loaded in the bottom of the 8th that, unfortunately for him and Yankee fans everywhere, would be caught by Juan Soto. 1 Francisco Lindor sac fly and 2 Edwin Diaz strikeouts later, and the Mets had managed to secure a crosstown victory, partially with the help of one of the rarer calls in the entire MLB rulebook. I made a video a little while back discussing the most biased umpiring performance of 2025, in which Jen Pawol basically gifted the Angels 2.5 runs with their calls, that were also the second worst on the year in terms of overall accuracy. This did kind of come out of nowhere for her though, as she had been fine in her previous 2 outings, so I'm sure many were wondering how her next game would go. But I don't think anybody was prepared for her to post one of the best umpiring performances you'll ever see from a rookie. The game was between the Marlins and Rockies, with Miami desperately trying to hold on to a sliver of playoff hope, and the Rockies just trying to avoid being the worst team ever. So, even if the stakes weren't the highest, they were there. And things would certainly start off well for her, as in the first inning alone there were multiple borderline strikes that she managed to nail, with the same being true in the bottom of the second, including on a crucial pitch with the bases loaded. And so it went. Even as pitches would miss their spots, or catchers wouldn't present offerings in the way that you'd like to see, she still was nailing the calls, with the same being true of her judgment on balls, not expanding the strike zone like we've seen her do a few times in recent appearances. In fact, this call to Otto Lopez was her only notably bad call of the night, with the rest being shadow pitches that could have gone either way. As for the game itself, the Rockies would go on to win 8-4 on the back of rookie slugger Agustin Ramirez crushing a home run and driving in 3, and Javier Sanoja going 3 for 5. Now, after the game was over, Umpire Auditor would release the scorecard I showed in the intro, which detailed that she had not only registered an overall accuracy of 97%, 3.2% above expected, by making 170 correct calls out of 175. This accuracy mark was not only one of the better games of the season, but one of the best you'll ever see from a rookie umpire, who generally perform at about an average level and improve marginally from there. As I said in my last video, I want to point out exceptional umpiring as much as I do when it's bad. And when an ump in their first 5 career games manages to post an elite performance, whether they be the first woman umpire or not, I believe that deserves to be highlighted every bit as much as when they falter. Again, woman or not. And now, before I go, I just wanted to give a mini shout out to Clayton Kershaw's final career strikeout at Dodger Stadium. A called strike 3 on a fastball that was probably a little bit low to Rafael Devers, but to those online who just saw this one call and maybe were clowning the ump for being a bit biased or something, I do want to point out that just 2 pitches earlier he had been robbed of a K, so I think it all evened out. Regardless, congratulations again Kersh on a fantastic career, and hopefully an amazing retirement. Alright everybody, if you made it this far, I appreciate you watching, and if you did, consider checking out any of these other videos on your screen right now for other content just like this. Also, if you ever see anything you'd like to see me detail in a video, feel free to reach out to my email, basebpoet@gmail.com, and if I end up using your idea, I'll give you a shout out. Thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your day.